Hello, everybody. Jeff Siegel here, and today I want to talk to you about the three most important words that you can use anytime, anywhere to improve your diet. Now, these words might not be exactly what you're thinking, right? They're not, is this healthy? Or am I hungry? Because actually, those questions don't often lead to productive places, right? Especially the question, is this healthy? All right, leads to all sorts of debates and ideologies when it comes down to the fact that outside of specific things like trans fats, heavy metals, pesticides, it's hard to say definitively whether any specific food is going to be unhealthy or healthy for you, for your body, because we need to look at health in terms of context. We need to look at it in terms of your overall dietary pattern. What are you eating day in, day out? We need to look at it in terms of your microbiome, in terms of your genetics, and importantly, in terms of your goals. What are your aims and aspirations when it comes to your nutrition? So, there's a much better question that you could be asking than, is this healthy? And anytime you want to pause and improve your eating, I'm going to suggest that you ask this instead. It is simply, instead of what? Instead of what? There are three ways this question, instead of what, can dramatically improve the way you eat. One is it takes eating that might happen on autopilot or mindlessly, all right, and it brings it into this conscious place where you can begin to think about what you're eating. Two is it can allow you to make better choices when you have two options to compare. When you have two choices that you can then hold side by side and say, all right, how are these things going to align with my goals, my aspirations, and so on and so forth, you can make the better one. And then three is that it can bring you into this really rich and productive conversation with your inner eaters. So let me walk you through these three things so you can understand how this question, instead of what, can help you improve your eating. All right. So let's start off. Let's say breakfast. You wake up, all right, you're in the morning, all right, you habitually are just going to grab some bar, throw it in your bag, maybe you're going to eat it in the car as you go to work, all right? Pause, right? Instead of having that bar for breakfast, right, what could you eat, right? Instead of what? And let's say I ask you that question, you say, well, instead of going to Dunkin' Donuts and getting some donuts and maybe some sugary drink, right? Now we have two options. You've got the bar that you're going to bring with you, and you've got some Dunkin' Donuts. You can hold those two side by side, and you can do a quick cost-benefit analysis. We could dig into things like macronutrients and micronutrients, right? If your goal is to generally eat more unprocessed foods, well, both of these options are going to be fairly processed. So maybe your goal is to eat less sugar. A lot of bars have a lot of sugar, but probably going to have maybe less sugar, less fat than a donut, or especially some sort of sugary drink. Right? So you can begin to weigh these two things together, all right? And at the end of the day, the bar is probably going to have fewer calories and fewer grams of sugar and things, so maybe that's the better option. But if you were to say to me, all right, well, instead of cooking some eggs or instead of making some oatmeal at home, now we can weigh those options, all right, next to this bar. And again, depending on what your goals are, what your aims are, all right, you could say, well, the eggs are going to have more protein, or you could say the oatmeal is home cooked, right? It's a little bit less processed, a little bit more wholesome. Maybe you can add some berries and fruit to it. Maybe that's, all right, a better option than the bar. And so there you can begin to see how eating one thing does not happen in a vacuum, right? It happens often in replacement of something else. And when we begin to examine what that something else is or could be, all right, it can help us then make better choices. Now, if you said to me, all right, well, actually, I would like to cook the eggs, but really I just don't have the time. Now, this is showing you what are you optimizing for. And this is really helpful because in this case, you're saying, well, I'm optimizing for convenience, for saving time. And it's so often the case in our world, all right, that we optimize for work, for productivity. And unfortunately, this often comes to the detriment of our health and our nutrition. So something to be aware of. So let's introduce another example. Let's say you're out to lunch, or you're out to dinner, you're looking at a menu, all right? And you've got one option here, chicken with potatoes, great, all right? And then you pause and you say, wait a second, let me ask this question, instead of what? Well, instead of shrimp with rice, All right, so you got chicken, potatoes, shrimp with rice. Now we can hold these two side by side. Again, we could begin to analyze macronutrients, calories, fat, carbohydrates. You could ask, well, do they come with sauces? All right, you could ask other questions like, well, how was the chicken raised? Maybe it was factory farm. Maybe I don't really want to support that. Right? You could ask other questions about the environmental footprint. Where were the veggies grown? Where were these things made? How far did they have to travel? All right, so you can begin to add in these extra layers of analysis because on the whole, maybe the chicken with potatoes and the shrimp with rice, are relatively equal in terms of macronutrients and in health. So then I'm going to ask you this follow-up question of, well, what would you rather have? Which one would you like? Which one do you prefer? What do you really, really desire right now? And this is important because it gets you tuning in. And so now you say, you know what? I've eaten a lot of chicken already, and I think I'd like to have the shrimp. I haven't had shrimp in a while, right? So this shows you what you're optimizing for. In this case, it would be variety. And now if we look at this in terms of your inner eaters, all right, this would say that you're optimizing for your picky eater that wants to maximize the pleasure that you can get from food and often enjoys a variety of foods, because if you keep eating the same thing over and over and over, inevitably, right, it's not going to be as pleasurable. You get diminishing returns from eating the same food. So your picky eater says, hey, let's do the shrimp. We haven't had shrimp in a while. Great. Now, if you said to me, you know what? Actually, I want to order the chicken and potatoes because it seems like kind of a heavier, heartier dish, and I'm actually really, really hungry right now. So now that says to me, you're optimizing for your instinctual eater. Maybe you haven't eaten in a while. Maybe you've been really active, right? Your instinctual eater is telling you, hey, all right, I need some nutrients. I need some calories. I need some energy. All right, you have a strong appetite. And so this question, instead of what, can help you see that more clearly. All right? Maybe you say, well, the person over there just ordered the shrimp with rice, so I'm going to order the chicken because I don't want to order the same thing that they're ordering. Great. This shows me that you're optimizing for your social eater, all right, who's paying attention to what other people order. Maybe you don't want to order the same thing. All right, maybe there's gender dynamics at play. Maybe the chicken seems a little more manly than the shrimp. Maybe there's the cost of the dish coming into factor and all sorts of other social elements, right? So it's not really about your hunger or the flavor, but it's about what's happening interpersonally, all right, at that meal that's going to influence your order. And so this now allows you to see that your social eater is the thing that you're optimizing for, right? Or you say, you know what, I'd rather eat the shrimp because the chicken is probably coming from some sort of industrial farm and I don't really want to support, unethical poultry practices. So now you're optimizing for your goal-based eater, specifically your environmental and ethical goal-based eater that wants to eat in a way that's sustainable, not only for the animals, but for the humans, the workers, the laborers involved in that industry. And so this question, instead of what, can allow you to see how all your eating might fall into one of these buckets of your inner eaters. Now, let me take you to one more really interesting scenario. Let's say you're at home, you just had dinner, you're hanging out, and then you go walk around and you say, that bar of chocolate is just staring you in the face. Okay? I want to eat some chocolate, right? And then you pause and you think to yourself with this question, right? Well, chocolate instead of what? Instead of nothing. Right? Because actually, I just ate. I'm not actually hungry. I've got plenty of calories, nutrients. All right? I don't need the energy. Right? So your instinctual eater at that point in time is saying, you know what? It's chocolate, right? Take it or leave it. I don't really need it right now. Right? But your picky eater is showing up and saying, that chocolate? Remember how good that tastes the night before? Remember that awesome, incredible mouthfeel and that sweetness that just melts on your tongue? Yeah. Let's do that again. So your picky eater is often the one that's going to be driving cravings. Right? And that is one of the vulnerabilities of your picky eaters, that it can become overly attached, all right, to specific foods, and that can lead you into these sort of habit loops when it comes to eating certain things. So your instinctual eater says, not hungry, just ate. Your picky eater says, hell yeah, let's eat the chocolate. All right. And now your social eater, this can kind of go either way. Maybe you were raised in a family where dessert always marked the end of the meal or the end of the day. Maybe your parents loved chocolate and you always saw them eating chocolate around the house at night. Maybe something as a kid, you were given chocolate as a special treat, as a way to show you how sweet you were or how well behaved you were. right? And in this case, your social eater would be saying, yeah, it's the end of the day, I deserve some chocolate, let's do that, right? But equally, as could be true, is that maybe you were raised in a family that didn't really do dessert, that didn't really like chocolate, there was never really any sweets around, there was never really this idea that you had to have some sort of sweet treat to end your day, right? And in that sort of household, then this would be sort of a take it or leave it thing. Nobody else is eating anything because you just ate dessert. So for you to go and treat yourself with some chocolate might actually be kind of out of the norm. And in that case, your social eater would be saying, nah, you don't need the chocolate. No big deal. Pass it up. Save it for another time, right? When you're actually hungry. And then lastly, your goal-based eater is going to chime in. And again, depending on what your goals are, is going to have different things to say, right? If your goal is to monitor your calories, then you might be saying, well, did I already hit my calorie budget for the day, right? Does this factor in? Is this going to help me lose weight, right? Or if your goal is to improve your performance, is this chocolate going to help me do that? Well, if I'm going to just go to bed in an hour anyway, probably not, Or if your goal is to improve your longevity, well, is the chocolate going to help me do that? Yeah, there are some awesome, healthful compounds in chocolate, specifically dark chocolate, right? But are those negated by the heavy amounts of sugar and saturated fat that also come in the chocolate? It's a bit of a toss-up there, so unclear, right? And if you look at that, again, through that lens of your environmental or ethical goal-based eater, you can ask them, where did this chocolate come from? Is this fair trade? Where was this produced? How are the workers compensated for their work? And if this is maybe some organic fair trade chocolate from a place that you know and trust that has a lot of transparency, then you say, yeah, I feel comfortable eating this because I know it came from a good place. Or if it's just some big anonymous brandless thing, then maybe not. So as you go through this question, you can begin to have this conversation with your inner eaters. You begin to see what's happening in this situation, of you habitually wanting to eat some chocolate or ice cream or whatever it is, maybe at the end of the night. You can see how your instinctual eater says, I'm not really hungry, but guess what? Your instinctual eater also has a tremendous capacity to keep eating even if it's not hungry, because evolutionarily that was adaptive, right? So outside of situations where you already have a ton of food in your digestive system or you're feeling physically sick or ill, your instinctual eater can usually manage a few more bites of something, right? Your picky eater is showing up, generally driving the craving, the wanting of that item, right? Your social eater, depending on your environment, your culture, the norms for your household, right, are going to change how this is interpreted. And then your goal-based eater is going to have different things to say. Now, at the end of the day, whether you eat the chocolate or not, right, ultimately matters less than whether you've had this conversation with your inner eaters. Because if you decide to eat the chocolate, and satisfy your picky eater, even if your instinctual eater and social eater and goal-based eater are all telling you, nah, not really, something we want, right? At least you've done it consciously. And that's very different from eating mindlessly, from eating habitually, from going on autopilot and just stuffing your face without truly understanding why you're eating the way you're eating. And then if you decide not to eat the chocolate, then that's great too. And you can find ways to work with your picky eater to satisfy it, because you can ask it, well, what about it was it truly wanting, Is it something specific to the chocolate, Or is it a feeling of relaxation, a feeling of comfort, a feeling of release that your picky eater is truly looking for? And then oftentimes we can find other substitutes that aren't food to give your picky eater what it needs and then still satisfy the needs of all your other inner eaters. And in this way, we can work with this inner eater ecosystem to better nourish ourselves, to make sure that your eaters are getting what they need as often as possible, and that you're moving, managing, being a good steward of your inner eaters. And this is what it's like to be an evolved eater. And so my hope is that by going through these different scenarios and introducing this question instead of what, it can really open up a much broader conversation with yourself about why you eat the way you do. Because at the end of the day, the inner eater framework is all about helping you understand who you are as an eater. It's not about moralizing food. It's not about good food, bad food, healthy, unhealthy. It's about truly having greater self-knowledge about what's going on with you and your eating. So until next time, Jeff Siegel here. I want you to pause, breathe, smile, and ask the question instead of what.